Hey guys, this is test 59 game 2. This is the Museum Curator's Photographs game. It's an ordering game. We know this because the photographs are hung along the wall in 7 positions sequentially numbered. So the word, sequentially here, and the numbers 1 through 7 in general, are your indications here that this is an ordering game. Now I've laid out a lot of rules here. I'm going to explain each of those. I put the 7 spaces 1 through 7. I said, G is immediately before K, so I put them in a box in that order. And we know that H is before K, so H therefore is also before the GK going consecutively, and I put a dash before H to indicate that there will be something coming earlier than it. I've also put down, I and L touching, either IL or LI. I put down, since M has to be one of the first 3 photographs, I put down that M is not 4, 5, 6, or 7, and then F on 1 or F on 7, so F/F on 1 and 7. So this right here is our initial setup for the game. We'll be doing a lot more work over the course of the game, drawing more specific diagrams. So anyway, question number 6 is a typical orientation question. We're just going to take one rule at a time and apply that rule to all 5 choices, looking for violations. So for example, we know that F has to be 1 or 7, so any choice without F on one of our endpoints is automatically bad. So choice E has M and I on the endpoints, not F, therefore E is bad. Next, we know that I and L have to touch, so any choice where they're not touching is automatically bad. And we see in choice D, I is not touching L, we've got M between them, therefore D can be eliminated. We also know that we have to have F, M within one of the first 3 spaces, so any choice without that is bad. Choice A has M on 4, not 1 through 3, so A is gone. We're down to B and C now, and we can look for the fact that we have to have G and K touching. So we could look for violations of that, but both B and C have them touching. We also know that H has to go before them, so we can look for that as well, but H is before G and K in both B and C. So finally, we know that H has to have something else before it. And so looking through the choices there, we see that on choice B, H is 1, which is unacceptable, so B is gone, leaving C as our answer for number 6. Next, number 7, if I was immediately before G. So if we had I immediately before G, that means that we'd have generally, IGK occurring consecutively in that order. We also know that L and I have to touch, so we're going to have LIGK occurring consecutively, and we also need H occurring before that, and we need something else before H. So things actually become pretty combined here. We know a lot. Anyway, what could be true? We'll just run through the choices. Could we have G on 4? Well, if G were on 4, we'd have to have I and L coming before it, and that would lead H to be on 1, but H can never go on 1, always something comes before it, therefore A is gone. Next, B, looking at H on 4. If H was on 4, we would need LIGK coming after it, but there's no room for that. K would be after the diagram, unacceptable, so B is gone. Looking at C with I on 3rd, if I was 3rd, we would need L 2nd, H 1st. That's not going to work because, again, H can never be 1st, so C is gone. Looking at D, L on 2. If L was 2, H would be 1, but again, H can never be 1, so D is gone, leaving E for number 7. Next, number 8, what would fully determine the layout of the variables? Well, right away, we know that I and L are interchangeable in this game, so anything that doesn't really lock down I and L can automatically be eliminated. So for that reason, I would get rid of A, B, and E just because they're not talking about I and L. They're not locking them down into particular places. So I'm going to cross those off right away and focus on the other things. Looking at C, I on 2. Well, if I was on 2, let's see what happens. If I's on 2, we're going to have, M, remember, on 1 and 3, and L has to touch I. So M and L are going to be interchangeable on 1 and 3, either LM or ML. And then, of course, M can't be any 4, 5, 6, 7. That's the reason for that. So after this, we're going to have if F can't be on 1, F is going to have to be on 7. So F is definitely on 7 there. And then we have H before G and K occurring in that order. So things become pretty locked down. But this is not fully determining everything. Is it M on 1 or L on 3, or is it L on 1 and M on 3? We really can't say. Therefore, I on 2 does not fully determine the game to only one possible layout, and C can be eliminated. So we get D by elimination for number 8, but let's look at why that works. If L was on 1, we would have to have I on 2 and F on 7 due to the fact that F is always 1 or 7 and that I and L always have to touch. Now, remaining here, we have to have M on 3 because M is always one of the first three spaces. Then we have H, G, K occurring on 4, 5, and 6. Things are fully determined. As you can see here, there's no ambiguity, no empty slots, no alternating variables, therefore, with slashes, therefore D is our answer for 8. Next, number 9, if M were on 2, what could not be true? So if M's on 2, 4 of these things could happen, one of them cannot happen. So find the one that cannot happen, eliminate them. Find the 4 that could happen, eliminate them, and whatever remains is your answer. Or if you just see something that doesn't work, obviously you could pick it. So anyway, M on 2, we know we're going to have H, G, and K coming after it, and we're also going to have I and L in that mix. So if M's on 2, we have after it H, we have, just to lay out what we're dealing with here, we've got G and K coming after it, and we've also got I and L, IL, LI occurring consecutively after that as well. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things coming after it on spaces 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Therefore, we can automatically infer that we're going to need to have F on 1 because there isn't room to have F on 7 here. So F is definitely occurring first. We've determined that. We've got to have I and L coming somewhere in this mix. So these are two different boxes that have to occur, remember. We've got to have GK and we've got to have IL both coming after this in some way. So we need a consecutive area, we need two different areas of two spaces each. So H could be on 5 or H could be on 3. But those are really the only places that H could go, because if H was on 4, we could have only one consecutive layout of 3 spaces, and if H were on 6, we could have only one consecutive layout of 3 spaces. So H cannot be on 4 in this scenario, H cannot be in 6 in this scenario. So H on 4, choice B, is our answer to number 9. G on 4 works fine, because then we could have GK on 4, 5, and then IL, LI on 6, 7. G6 is fine, because then we could have GK on 6, 7, and then IL on 3, 4, or 4, 5. H go in whichever slot I'm not talking about. That would work fine too. And then, like I said, H on 3 or 5 would work perfectly fine, because we'd still have, two different areas of 2 spaces each where we could fit these 2 boxes. So anyway, C and A are both gone, leaving B. Next, number 10. This is a rule substitution question. So they're asking us which one of the following, if substituted for the rule that H is before K but cannot be first. So basically, H before the GK box, but not the first thing, meaning something coming after. So what would lead us to have, H before 1 not permitted, and at the same time would still require that H was before, GK occurring consecutively in that order. So what would have an equivalent effect, no more limiting, no less limiting. So the correct answer choice here will not render invalid any previously valid scenario, and it will still impose the exact same limitations on the constraints of the game. So we'll run through the choices looking for what would be too restrictive or not restrictive enough. So anyway, choice A is saying, if F were on 7, H would be on 2. The problem here is that, we've seen scenarios where F was on 7, but we had either L or M first. For example, in question A, when we were testing out choices C and D, we saw we could have I on 2 and then either L or M on 1. So when F is on, and then of course F was on 7 in that case. So F on 7 does not originally require H to be on 2. Therefore, this is too limiting in that regard, and A can be eliminated. Next, looking at B. B is saying that, G comes after H, so that's pretty good because that deals with this part. So that's okay. But then saying that F or M is first, well, that's not a general constraint for the game because we've seen L first, for example, back in when we were drawing diagrams for question 8, choices C and D. And we've also seen back in question 6, choice C, that it was possible to have I first. Therefore, this game does not require, in general, that you have either F or M first, and B is too limiting in that regard as well. Next, looking at C, H somewhere from 1 to 6. Well, that would still allow H to be first, and we know that H cannot be first. Additionally, H could never be on 6 in this game because it's got to have both G and K coming after it. So C is not limiting enough in that regard, and C is gone. Next, looking at D, unless H is second. So this is a conditional statement saying if H was not second, then H must be between M and G. Now, of course, we know that G is coming later, the GK box is coming after this because, M is always one of the first 3. So this right here, if H is not second, then we have that. Well, yeah, that's fine, because if H is not second, you might have thought, well, H could be first. but M going before that prevents this. And of course, H being third is perfectly fine. And if H is before G, then it's also before K. So this actually fits exactly with what we already knew for the game. It's precisely equivalent. No more limiting, no less limiting. Therefore, D is our answer to number 10. I will look at E though. K somewhere after H. So if K was somewhere after H, that would simply lead us to H before both G and K. That works perfectly fine, of course. That's good in that regard. But which is somewhere after F, meaning that H is somewhere after F, or in other words, F before H. Now, that's not something we previously knew to have, that had to be the case. That was not a requirement we previously had. That's saying that F basically has to be first, because F is always 1 or 7th according to the final rule of the game. But we've seen plenty of scenarios where F could be 7th. For example, we saw in question 6, choice C, we could have F 7th. We also saw that in diagrams that we drew for number 8, choices C and D. So this is more limiting than the previous rule was. Therefore, it's not equivalent. E is gone, leaving D.